In a busy industrial yard, a forklift operator attempts the difficult task of lifting a large, heavy, and awkwardly shaped pipe flange with only one fork. The load is dangerously unstable and severely off-center from the start. As the operator raises the mast, the forklift's center of gravity shifts dramatically. In a matter of seconds, the machine loses its balance and tips over sideways, trapping and crushing the operator in the cab underneath its immense weight. This tragic incident was caused by the improper lifting of an unbalanced and oversized load, far exceeding the forklift's rated capacity and stability. Such an object should have been moved using appropriate rigging with multiple attachment points and a crane, not a forklift, to prevent a catastrophic tip-over. During a circus performance in front of a live audience, an acrobat begins to ride a bicycle across a high wire. Midway through the act, the performer suddenly loses balance. Both he and the bicycle plummet to the hard stage below. High wire acts are incredibly dangerous, and this incident underscores the risk. The clear lack of a safety net or a personal fall arrest harness connected to a safety line made this fall unsurvivable. A young girl is seen in a garage, playing near a partially open metal roll-up door. She curiously reaches up and begins to pull the heavy door downward. Suddenly, the door's counterbalancing spring mechanism appears to fail catastrophically. The heavy door breaks free and free falls with tremendous speed and force, slamming shut and trapping the child underneath in an instant. This is a heartbreaking and preventable tragedy. Heavy, spring-loaded doors require regular inspection and maintenance to ensure their safety mechanisms are fully functional. Two pedestrians are standing on the very edge of a busy roadway, perilously close to passing traffic. A white bus approaches, and without slowing, it strikes both individuals, throwing them violently into the air. Standing this close to an active traffic lane leaves absolutely no margin for error or driver distraction. On a highway, a man is riding his motorcycle when a panicked bull suddenly runs into his path. The collision knocks the rider from his bike, throwing him directly into the lane of an oncoming truck, leaving no time for the truck driver to stop. An elderly woman attempts to cross a road while pulling a large wheeled trash can behind her. As she steps into the street, she moves directly into the path of an oncoming white SUV. The driver doesn't appear to see her, and the vehicle strikes her without slowing down. Inside a tire repair shop, two mechanics work on a large, unmounted tractor tire. As they attempt to inflate it without proper safety equipment, the tire's internal pressure builds to a critical point. It explodes with catastrophic force, creating a powerful concussive blast that throws the men. Inflating large tires is extremely dangerous due to the immense stored energy and must always be done inside a reinforced steel safety cage. Inside a material processing facility, a worker manages heavy stone slabs positioned near a cutting machine. Suddenly, a large slab becomes unstable and tips forward due to a shift in weight, creating a hazardous situation for the operator in the fall zone. This incident highlights the critical need to secure heavy loads during processing and reminds us to never stand in the direct line of fire where unstable materials might fall. In a chemical processing plant, workers are inspecting a large industrial tank when an apparent valve failure causes a sudden, rapid release of pressure. The resulting release of energy disrupts the immediate area, serving as a stark reminder that pressure vessels require rigorous maintenance. Workers must always verify pressure levels and follow strict lockout procedures before approaching such equipment. An auto mechanic is working near an open service pit while a vehicle is being positioned nearby. The driver appears to lose control, possibly confusing the pedals, causing the car to accelerate suddenly into the pit area. To prevent such accidents, Clear communication between drivers and ground guides is vital, and physical barriers should be used around open pits during vehicle maneuvering. A group of workers moves a tall metal scaffold structure across a paved area without noticing the overhead environment. As they push the frame, the top makes contact with high-voltage power lines, sending an electrical current down to the workers. This scenario emphasizes the importance of surveying the area for overhead hazards and maintaining a safe distance from power lines at all times. A vehicle is being loaded onto a flatbed tow truck when the securing mechanism fails, causing the car to roll rapidly backward off the ramp toward the operator. This mechanical failure illustrates why operators should never stand directly behind or below a load being winched. Regular equipment checks on cables and winches are essential to prevent failure during recovery operations. At a construction site, a crane lifts a bundle of heavy metal beams when the rigging suddenly slips. The load detaches mid-air and falls to the ground near the workers. This incident underscores that proper rigging techniques and load balancing are essential for crane safety. And establishing a clear exclusion zone underneath lifted loads is mandatory to protect personnel. In a busy commercial kitchen, staff transport a large, open container of hot liquid when one worker loses their footing. The container tips over, spilling the high-temperature contents onto the floor and the personnel. To minimize thermal risks, slip-resistant footwear is crucial, and carts with sealed lids should always be used when transporting hot substances. At a metal recycling yard, a worker introduces an ignition source near a sealed metal drum. Residual fumes inside the container ignite instantly, causing a rapid expansion of gas and a concussive blast. This serves as a critical warning never to apply heat or open flames to sealed drums without verifying they are completely empty and purged of hazardous residues. A driver prepares to unload a truck filled with heavy timber logs, but as the side restraints are released, the load shifts due to gravity. One of the heavy timbers falls outward, striking the individual standing next to the truck. When releasing cargo straps, workers must always assume the load has shifted and stand clear or use remote release mechanisms to avoid the fall path. A machinist working with a long metal bar on a rotating lathe gets their loose clothing caught on the spinning material. Although they pull away just in time, this near miss demonstrates that loose clothing, gloves, and jewelry are major hazards near rotating machinery. Wearing proper fitted work attire is a primary defense against entanglement. Inside a textile factory, a man is operating a large warping machine with a massive rotating beam. As he works near the intake, his clothing gets caught by the powerful roller. He is instantly pulled off his feet and violently spun around as he's dragged into the machinery. His co-workers rush to stop the machine, but the incident has already occurred. This horrific accident underscores the danger of wearing loose clothing around rotating equipment. Furthermore, machines of this type must have emergency stops within easy reach and proper guarding to prevent any possibility of contact with moving parts. In a steel warehouse, a worker stands directly underneath a massive coil of sheet metal being moved by an overhead crane. Suddenly, the clamp holding the multi-ton roll fails, and the coil drops, instantly crushing the man below. This is an absolute violation of the most basic overhead lifting rule. Never, under any circumstances, position yourself under a suspended load. Safe zones must be clearly established and enforced. At an excavation site, several workers are standing perilously close to the edge of a deep pit while an excavator works above them. The operator swings the bucket, either misjudging the distance or not seeing the worker below, and knocks one man directly into the excavation. This highlights a severe lack of communication and site control. Workers on foot should never be in the swing radius of heavy equipment, and operators must ensure their path is clear before moving. In a heavy manufacturing plant, workers are gathered around a massive engine assembly being lifted by an overhead crane. The rigging suddenly gives way, and the entire multi-ton apparatus crashes to the floor, shattering on impact and narrowly missing several people. The incident was caused by a catastrophic rigging failure. All lifting equipment, including slings and shackles, must be inspected before each use and rated for a weight far exceeding the load. A crane operator lowers a large bundle of sacks into an open pit in a factory floor. A female worker stands on the edge to guide the load. As the heavy bundle swings, its momentum pushes her off balance, and she falls backward into the hole. Workers should never use their bodies to directly guide a suspended load. Taglines should always be used to control the load from a safe distance, away from fall hazards. Two technicians are working on a large CNC machine. As one of them leans in and touches a component, he receives a severe electrical shock, causing him to convulse and collapse. This points to either damaged wiring or a failure to properly de-energize and lock out the machine before beginning service work. Inside what appears to be a paper recycling facility, a worker is manually pushing material into the opening of a large industrial pulper. He leans too far over the unguarded opening, loses his footing, and is instantly pulled into the powerful machine. A large plume of dust and steam erupts from the machine. This tragedy was entirely preventable. The machine's feed opening must have been equipped with proper guarding and a feed system, like a conveyor belt, to eliminate the need for any worker to be near the point of operation. A worker wearing a hard hat walks backward into the path of a reversing cement mixer truck. The driver, likely unable to see him in the blind spot, continues to back up, striking the man and knocking him to the ground. All large vehicles must be equipped with backup alarms, and drivers should use a spotter when reversing in areas with pedestrian traffic. Pedestrians, in turn, must remain aware of their surroundings. A worker enters the safety enclosure of a large industrial robotic arm while it is still operational. The robot activates, moving swiftly along its programmed path, and pins the man against a stationary part of the cell. Safety interlocks on gates are designed to prevent this. They must never be bypassed. In a garage, two mechanics are working on a large, inflated truck tire that is not in a safety cage. The tire suddenly explodes with catastrophic force, throwing both men across the workshop. Inflating large tires must always be done within a reinforced safety cage to contain the explosive energy in case of a blowout. A worker stands next to a flatbed trailer heavily loaded with stacked steel I-beams. The load, which is not properly secured, suddenly shifts and slides off the side of the trailer, burying the man underneath. All heavy loads must be secured with appropriate chains or straps to prevent any movement during transport or unloading. On a building's upper level, a worker in a red shirt walks dangerously close to an unprotected edge. There are no guardrails or safety lines in place. In a moment of distraction, he takes a step back without looking, misjudging his position, and plummets to the ground. This tragic fall highlights why fall protection is non-negotiable when working at heights. Any open edge requires guardrails or the mandatory use of personal fall arrest systems. Engineering controls are far more reliable than relying on situational awareness alone. At another construction site, a worker standing on a concrete ledge attempts to cross a gap using a single, unsecured wooden plank as a bridge. The instant he transfers his weight onto the plank, it flips and gives way beneath him, causing him to fall. This incident is a stark reminder of the dangers of using makeshift walkways. All temporary platforms must be properly engineered, secured at both ends, and load-rated to prevent catastrophic failure. In a large industrial yard, a forklift operator moves a large bin that completely obstructs his forward view. Meanwhile, two workers walk through the active vehicle area, seemingly oblivious to the moving machinery. As the forklift makes a wide turn, the operator, blind to the pedestrian directly in his path, strikes the man and runs him over. His colleague can only watch in horror. This devastating incident reveals multiple critical safety failures. Operators must never travel with a load that obstructs their view. If unavoidable, they must travel in reverse or use a spotter. Furthermore, dedicated, clearly marked pedestrian walkways must be established to segregate people from heavy machinery. From a scooter's point of view, we see the rider following a large cement mixer on a narrow road bordered by a rock face. The rider makes the dangerous decision to overtake on the right shoulder, where there is no lane. The space rapidly narrows, leading to a direct collision with the rock wall. This illustrates a vital traffic safety rule. Never overtake a large vehicle on the right, especially in a non-designated lane due to massive blind spots. A female worker in a red safety vest stands near a large industrial mixing machine, placing her hand on it. Without warning, the machine begins to move forward. She's instantly knocked off her feet and pulled underneath the heavy equipment. The primary failure here is a lack of a proper lockout-tagout procedure before any maintenance or interaction in the immediate vicinity of such machinery. It must be de-energized and locked out to prevent unexpected startup. At a railroad crossing, a scooter with two riders waits as the warning gates are down. Growing impatient, the driver decides to maneuver around the safety barrier and cross the tracks. As they enter the crossing, a train appears at high speed, giving them no chance to escape the collision. Railroad crossing gates and warning signals are absolute safety measures and must always be obeyed. Going around them is a fatal gamble. An elderly woman stands near the open rear door of a city bus. Before she is safely clear of the vehicle, the bus driver begins to pull away from the curb. The sudden movement causes the woman to lose her balance and fall backward, striking her head hard on the pavement. The bus continues on its route, the driver apparently unaware of what has just happened. This highlights a critical failure of the driver to ensure all passengers are safely clear of the bus before proceeding. Checking mirrors and waiting for passengers to be on the curb is essential to prevent these falls. On a dirt road at a construction or drilling site, two workers stand beside their small utility truck. Uphill and behind them, a large front-end loader begins to reverse. The operator fails to see the vehicle and workers in their massive blind spot. The loader continues backwards, completely running over and crushing the small truck and the two workers beneath it, who had no chance to escape. This devastating accident shows a complete breakdown of sight awareness. Heavy equipment operators must have a clear 360-degree view or use a spotter before moving, and workers on foot must never linger in the blind spots of large machinery. In a car service bay, a mechanic works under the open hood of a car being converted to run on compressed gas. Without warning, the red gas cylinder inside the engine compartment fails catastrophically. It shoots out of the car like a rocket, ricochets off the ground, and triggers a massive fiery explosion that engulfs a nearby vehicle. Working with compressed gas systems like LPG or CNG is extremely hazardous. This was likely a tank failure from damage or overpressurization, and all work on such systems requires specialized training to prevent an explosive decompression. A busy street market is set up dangerously close to a live railway line. As a long freight train passes through the area, a person standing too near the tracks is struck by the locomotive and pulled under the moving train cars. This dashcam footage captures a busy highway with congested traffic. A motorcyclist attempts to weave between lanes, trying to get ahead. The rider makes a critical error by trying to cut in front of a large tanker truck from the right side, placing them directly in the driver's significant blind spot. The truck, moving forward with traffic, collides with the unseen motorcycle, pulling the rider under its wheels. Riders must always assume they are invisible to truck drivers and avoid maneuvering in these dangerous no zones. On what appears to be a normal day, a high-angle security camera captures a street view in front of a multi-story building. Without any warning, the building's entire facade detaches and collapses in a massive cloud of dust and debris, crashing down onto the street and crushing the parked motorcycles below. This type of catastrophic structural failure points to severe issues like neglected maintenance or a potential gas leak, underscoring the necessity of regular building inspections. On an elevated platform at an industrial plant, workers are positioned near a large piece of equipment. One man handles a flexible hose connected to the system. Suddenly, a coupling fails, and the pressurized hose whips around, dousing him with a powerful jet of chemicals. He is immediately engulfed in a vapor cloud and collapses. This incident underscores the extreme danger of pressurized systems. Hoses and their fittings must undergo regular inspection for wear and be properly secured to prevent catastrophic failure. Appropriate PPE, including full-face shields and chemical-resistant suits, is non-negotiable. In a textile factory, a worker tends to a massive fabric winding machine. He reaches over the large, rapidly spinning roll to make an adjustment. In an instant, his arm is caught, and the machine's immense power pulls his entire body in, wrapping him violently within the roll of fabric. His co-workers rush to his aid, desperately trying to halt the machine. For over a minute, they struggle with the controls and attempt to manually reverse the powerful mechanism to free their trapped colleague. This horrific entanglement is a direct result of inadequate machine guarding. A protective barrier with an interlock switch would have shut the machine down. This also serves as a grim reminder to never reach over moving parts. The chaotic rescue highlights the need for clear and practiced emergency stop procedures for all heavy machinery. Inside a busy workshop or warehouse, employees are engaged in their daily tasks. Without warning, a violent explosion erupts in the middle of the workspace, sending a shockwave and debris flying in all directions. The likely culprit is a catastrophic failure of a pressurized gas cylinder. Such cylinders must be stored securely upright, chained in place, and kept away from heat sources or areas where they could suffer physical impact. In a vast warehouse, an operator drives an electric pallet jack down an aisle lined with towering storage racks. He appears to be inattentive or fatigued as the vehicle slowly veers to the right. It makes a seemingly minor impact with the base of a shelving upright. But that's all it takes. The collision triggers a devastating domino effect, bringing down the entire aisle of heavy shelving in a matter of seconds. The operator barely manages to run to safety as tons of product come crashing down. This shows why rack protectors are vital and, more importantly, that operators must remain alert at all times, as fatigue can have catastrophic consequences. A worker is feeding material into a green industrial rolling machine. He is sitting directly on the machine's frame, an incredibly dangerous position right next to the powerful intake rollers. As he guides the material, his hand gets caught. He is instantly pulled in and crushed by the machine. This fatal incident was entirely preventable. The machine had no guarding at its point of operation, a fundamental safety violation. Workers must never place themselves on or near moving machinery. Guards, light curtains, or two-hand controls are essential to prevent such tragedies. In a factory setting, a worker operates a large rolling press. As he guides material into the machine's intake, his hand is suddenly caught. He is violently and instantly pulled completely into the powerful rollers. This tragic incident highlights a critical lack of point-of-operation guarding. Safety interlocks, light curtains, or two-hand controls are essential safeguards to prevent such immediate and horrific accidents. From a high vantage point on a construction site, a crane is lifting a platform with 3 workers on it. Suddenly, the rigging gives way, and the platform violently tilts. One of the workers loses his footing and plummets several stories to the ground below. Riding on loads or platforms not specifically designed for personnel is an extremely high-risk activity and is prohibited on most job sites. Only certified man baskets should be used for lifting personnel. At a port, a crane is lifting a large hopper over a truck. Multiple workers are standing around and on the truck, directly underneath the suspended load. Suddenly, the rigging fails, and the multi-ton hopper plummets, crushing the truck's cab and striking at least one person. The number 1 rule of crane safety is to never position yourself under a suspended load. A clearly marked exclusion zone must be established and maintained for all lifting operations. This incident was caused by a failure in the lifting gear, underscoring the need for certified riggers and thorough pre-lift inspections. 3 workers stand near a stack of heavy steel I-beams resting on supports. The stack appears to be poorly secured. One man begins to unhook a strap, and the loss of that support causes the entire pile to become unstable. The heavy beams slide off their supports and cascade to the ground, pinning one of the workers underneath. His colleagues desperately try to move the immensely heavy beams to free him. This demonstrates a critical failure in material storage. Heavy, unsecured loads are a constant hazard. They must be properly stacked, chocked, and secured, and bindings should only be removed when the load is stabilized by a lifting device. A large semi-truck reverses into a loading dock bay, while a worker stands in the driver's blind spot. Unable to see the ground personnel, the driver continues reversing, pinning the worker against the platform. Because loading docks are high-risk zones, drivers must strictly follow spotter signals, and pedestrians should never position themselves between a reversing vehicle and a fixed object. A sanitation worker sweeps a narrow street while a car attempts to park nearby. The driver loses control of the vehicle, surging backward and striking the worker. Situational awareness is critical for street workers, and while high-visibility clothing helps, physical barriers or cones are often necessary to create a safe buffer zone from unpredictable traffic. A worker opens the rear doors of a transport truck, carrying loose pipes that have shifted against the latch. As the door opens, a heavy pipe tumbles out unexpectedly, striking the worker. To prevent these avalanche scenarios, loads that can roll must be secured independently of the doors, and workers should always open doors cautiously from a safe position. In a textile factory, a worker gets too close to the intake rollers of a large winding machine. The machinery catches their clothing, pulling them into the mechanism. This incident highlights that machine guarding is essential to prevent contact with nip points, and workers must be trained to keep a safe distance from intake zones while ensuring emergency stops are accessible. An operator feeding material into a hydraulic press places a hand inside the danger zone to make an adjustment. The machine cycles unexpectedly, clamping down on the hand. Safety sensors must never be bypassed, and systems like two-hand controls or light curtains are vital to ensure the operator's hands are completely clear before the machine applies pressure. A worker stands near a large rotating industrial drum when a piece of material they are holding gets caught in the spinner. The immense rotational force pulls the worker into the machinery. Workers must respect the kinetic energy of large rotating machines. Never hold material being fed into a spinner. and ensure automatic shutoff systems are active. A forklift moves through a warehouse aisle and, due to a blind spot, strikes a pedestrian walking nearby. Segregating pedestrian and forklift traffic is the most effective safety measure in these environments. Where paths must cross, eye contact between the driver and pedestrian must be established before anyone moves to prevent collisions. An overhead crane moving a massive roll of paper suffers a structural failure in the hoist mechanism. The heavy load detaches and falls to the factory floor. This failure reminds us that regular inspections of hoist brakes and cables are mandatory. And more importantly, no one should ever walk or work under a suspended load, regardless of how secure it appears. A worker uses their foot to manually adjust a paper roll on a high-speed winder, but the friction catches their leg, pulling them into the machine. This severe entrapment scenario reinforces the rule that feet or hands should never be used to align materials on moving equipment. Proper tools and automated systems must be used to keep limbs away from intake zones. In a tight warehouse yard, a pedestrian walks behind a reversing truck, assuming the driver is aware of their presence. The truck continues backward, resulting in an impact. While backup alarms are helpful, pedestrians must assume they are invisible to truck drivers and stay completely clear of reversing paths to ensure their safety. At a paper mill, a worker tries clearing a jam from a large industrial roller. Suddenly, he's violently pulled into the machine. This is a classic failure of lockout-tagout. Power must be cut and locked out before maintenance. A tow truck has parked with its steel winch cable stretched taut across a residential street. A scooter rider, completely unaware of the nearly invisible hazard, drives at speed directly into it. He is violently clotheslined and thrown from the bike. This is gross negligence. Any cable stretched across a public way must be made highly visible with flags and cones, and the area should have been completely blocked off from traffic. In an auto repair shop, a mechanic carefully guides a pickup truck into a service bay. The driver suddenly accelerates instead of braking, pinning the worker against the wall. This shows the inherent danger of being in a vehicle's path. Spotters must always maintain a safe distance and have a clear escape route. Inside a textile factory, workers stand near a massive thread winding machine where hundreds of threads are fed at high speed. One worker gets too close, and a thread snags his clothing, violently pulling him off his feet and dragging him toward the intake rollers. This machinery presents a severe entanglement risk. Proper machine guarding is essential to create a barrier between workers and moving parts. Additionally, loose clothing should never be worn, and emergency stop controls must be clearly marked. An instructor and a child ride a tandem zip line over a deep ravine. Suddenly, the child slips completely out of their harness. The instructor heroically manages to grab and hold on to the child as they speed down the line. This is a shocking failure of pre-ride safety protocols. All harnesses, carabiners, and safety lines must be inspected and double-checked before every single use. A forklift loads a stack of heavy industrial tires onto a truck bed, where another worker is waiting. The load is unstable and suddenly topples over, crushing the man beneath its immense weight. This is a fatal mistake of being in the line of fire. Workers must never be under a suspended or unstable load. The load should have been stacked securely, and workers should clear the area during lifting operations. A man enters a hardware store, grabs a can of flammable liquid, and immediately starts a fire in an aisle. This isn't a workplace accident, but a deliberate act of arson. For any business, this shows the importance of having multiple, clearly marked fire extinguishers, unobstructed emergency exits, and a well-rehearsed evacuation plan. At a tire shop, a mechanic works on a large truck tire lying on the ground. Without any warning, the tire explodes with incredible force, throwing the mechanic through the air. This catastrophic event is why inflating large tires requires strict safety protocols. Overpressurization or damage to the tire's structure can turn it into a bomb. All large tires must be inflated inside a reinforced safety cage, which is designed to contain the explosive energy. Workers should never lean or stand directly over a tire as it is inflated. At a loading dock, a forklift operator begins to raise the forks. At that exact moment, a scooter carrying 2 people drives directly into their path, colliding hard with the rising steel forks. This incident highlights the chaos of a poorly managed work zone. There is a severe lack of situational awareness from both the scooter driver and the forklift operator. Industrial yards require clear, designated pathways for vehicles and pedestrians, good lighting, and for all personnel to remain alert. In a poorly lit workshop, 2 men are working on the floor near what appears to be a compressed gas cylinder. Suddenly, it explodes in a massive fireball. Gas cylinders are potential bombs if mishandled. They must always be stored upright, secured from falling, and inspected for damage before use. A man operates a large industrial lathe, leaning over the rapidly spinning chuck. His loose jacket sleeve gets snagged, and he is instantly and violently pulled into the machine, spinning at a terrifying speed before a coworker hits the emergency stop. This is a classic entanglement accident. The number 1 rule when working with rotating machinery is absolutely no loose clothing, untied long hair, or jewelry. These items can be grabbed in a fraction of a second. Additionally, a chuck shield could have prevented this contact. At a gas station next to a busy roundabout, a chaotic car accident occurs. One of the involved cars rolls backward, out of control, directly into the station forecourt, striking an unsuspecting attendant sitting in a chair. This incident underscores the risk of working near live traffic. Protective barriers, like bollards, are essential to shield work areas from errant vehicles. A large truck reverses toward a loading bay, while a pedestrian walks directly into its path from behind. The driver, with no visibility in this massive blind spot, continues backing up and runs the person over completely. This is a tragic and preventable blind spot accident. Large vehicles must be equipped with functioning backup alarms and cameras. Crucially, a dedicated spotter should always guide a reversing truck, maintaining constant visual contact with the driver. In a busy shipping yard, a man walks across the pavement while completely absorbed by his phone. He fails to notice an approaching forklift and steps directly into its path, getting struck and knocked down. This is a clear case of distracted walking in a high-risk environment. Using a phone while walking in an active yard with heavy machinery should be strictly forbidden. Pedestrians must maintain full situational awareness at all times. A mechanic performs welding work underneath a car on a lift. Sparks from his tool ignite a flammable liquid on the floor, likely spilled fuel, and the vehicle erupts into a massive ball of fire. The mechanic is forced to scramble to safety from the inferno. This is a failure of hot work safety procedures. Before any welding or grinding, the area must be completely cleared of all flammable materials, including liquids, vapors, and oily rags. A fire extinguisher must be within arm's reach, and it is also standard practice to disconnect the vehicle's battery. A woman in a lab coat stands in the lobby of a clinic as a visitor enters through a large, frameless glass door. As the visitor closes the door behind her, it suddenly detaches from its overhead pivot hinge. The massive sheet of tempered glass falls and explodes on impact with the floor, sending shards everywhere. The employee inside is startled, but manages to avoid the main impact. This type of failure points to improper installation or worn-out hardware. The fittings for heavy glass doors require regular inspection and maintenance to ensure they can safely support the weight. Inside a factory, one worker is bent over near a long textile machine. The worker's loose clothing gets caught on a low-profile rotating roller. He is instantly flipped and violently dragged into the machinery. This is another severe entanglement incident caused by an unguarded rotating part. Even seemingly slow-moving components can be incredibly dangerous. Machine guarding and prohibiting loose clothing are critical preventative measures that were ignored here. At a construction site, workers are guiding a crane-lifted concrete bucket into position. One man stands directly in the load's swing path to maneuver it by hand. The load shifts unexpectedly, striking him squarely in the head and knocking him to the ground unconscious. Suspended loads must only be guided using taglines from a safe distance. Placing yourself in the path of a swinging load puts you at the mercy of physics, a risk no one should ever take. A worker guides a thick metal wire onto a large, rotating spooling machine. His gloved hand gets too close and is caught between the wire and the spool. The machine's torque instantly pulls him off his feet, slamming him against the frame as his arm is dragged into the mechanism. This type of entanglement happens in a split second. Guiding materials should be done with appropriate tools from a safe distance, and all rotating parts require proper guarding to prevent any possibility of contact. In a commercial bakery, a worker is cleaning around a massive industrial dough mixer while the safety cage is lifted up. As she bends down, a co-worker walks up to the machine and, without checking his surroundings, activates it. The powerful mixing hook starts to rotate, catching the woman and pulling her into the bowl. The other workers rush in panic to stop the machine and help their gravely injured colleague. This is a catastrophic failure to follow lockout-tagout procedures. The machine should have been completely de-energized and locked before any cleaning began. The safety guard was bypassed, and the operator failed to ensure the area was clear before starting the equipment. In a processing facility, a massive bulk bag of granular material is suspended from a hoist. A worker climbs onto a metal cart, positioning himself directly underneath the 1-ton bag to cut it open from the bottom. The moment he punctures the bag, the lifting loops fail, and the entire load collapses on top of him, burying him completely. His co-workers are forced into a desperate and lengthy rescue, digging through the material by hand to find him. This is a fatal mistake, born from ignoring the most fundamental rule of lifting: never work under a suspended load. The bag should have been securely placed in a proper discharging station before being opened. This tragic event demonstrates how a shortcut can lead to the ultimate price, leaving colleagues to deal with the horrifying aftermath of a decision that took only seconds to make. In a commercial kitchen, a deep fryer catches fire. A worker panics and throws a container of liquid, almost certainly water, onto the flames. This causes a violent eruption, spreading the grease fire. After the initial mistake, he reacts correctly by grabbing a fire extinguisher to put out the blaze. This is a crucial lesson. Never use water on a grease fire. Water vaporizes instantly, spreading burning oil. The proper response is to smother the fire with a lid, or use a Class K fire extinguisher specifically designed for kitchen fires.